The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Ronald Reagan stated this. This quote reminds me of this latest executive order that the Biden administration's put out. The title of it is Executive Order on Further Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities Through the Federal Government. What a word salad. Basically, it is pushing equity before anything else. So there is I think our common language right now has a problem where there's confusion of equality versus equity. I've talked about this probably way too many times on the show, so sorry if you've heard me ramble about this before, but equality means equal opportunity, equity means equal outcomes. The goal should be equality, in my opinion. If equity happens to come from that, amazing. We should consider equity in what we consider equality of opportunity, yes. So if we know by default, like obviously there is a problem where many people in this country are starting off at a really bad point through poverty, parents are in bad situations, things like that. Obviously, we want to do something about that. I think that goes on the equality side of it, not the equity side. The prime example of the bad part of equity would be California, for example, putting in requirements for a certain number of female individuals to be on the board, or women. I don't know how they classify it now because of the way they've manipulated language so much with gender norms. But either way, you need to have a certain amount of diversity on your board in order for it to operate in the state of California. That's terrible. Like, if you want your board to be people that support the company and think of the best interests of the company and their shareholders, that's their job. It should not be racial and gender equity. It's terrible. It goes back to what I was talking about with Greg Moore from AFP about the push for ESGs to be the priority. Like, ESGs in theory can be great. Many people can think that these are things we should focus on, these standards. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's what's best for people that are investing their retirements. That doesn't mean they're necessarily going to make the money they need to retire when they are hoping to retire or need to retire, because there's health reasons why some people need to retire at a certain age. And if they've been screwed over because of poor management of their stock portfolio, I mean, isn't that the opposite of positive equity? Isn't that a bad way to be looking at it? I just don't understand. So I have, if you look at the fact sheet, as they call it, they put it in this super positive light because it's politics. Let's another thing I think people get confused about is the White House and the president are political operators. The staff that President Biden or President Trump or Obama or Bush or anyone else puts around them are political operators. So when you see, I feel like a lot of people finally had their eyes open to that during the Trump administration with his press secretaries, because it was very confrontational between the press and the press secretary. I think it's great that people have their eyes open to it, but let's not mistake that Karine Jean-Pierre and everyone else that's operating in the White House isn't there to further a political agenda. They may have the best of intentions with certain things. For example, the idea of advancing racial equity to support underserved communities is great in theory. The issue is, how is the federal government going to do that? And basically, in my opinion, the only way the federal government is going to be able to do that is by forcing companies to do certain things, whether or not it's for the best of their business. And yes, there is a balance that needs to be struck between having a business that's, I already said, but basically a business operating in very unethical ways and firing people based on race and crazy things like that, and maybe we don't want to invest in British Petroleum, BP, right after they dumped thousands of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. We have not forgotten that, BP. Let's not forget. But when you're putting the entire focus, right here he says that, quote, empowers federal equity leaders. The executive order strengthens requirements for agencies to build and resource agency equity teams and designates senior leaders accountable for implementing the president's equity mandate. So you are forcing different government agencies to work to force equity mandates within companies. I mean, right here it says, in line with the president's commitment to advancing gender equity and equality at home and abroad, okay, going back into the quote, and the president's commitment to advancing environmental justice, equality for LGBTQI plus individuals, and other equity work streams. The government should not be doing this. I feel like the Democrats have been brainwashed into thinking we made no progress since the civil rights movement. I don't understand this. We have made tremendous improvements to how people are treated in this country based on their race, their sexuality, their gender. I mean, consider the amount of women that are in the workplace nowadays. I mean, look back 100 years, obviously that was not the case. We also need to consider that the workplace didn't exist in the same way it does right now, so let's also keep that in mind. And the implications of that. It makes me think also back to the old women are paid 70 cents on the dollar compared to men for the same job. That's not true. It's if you start forcing more or driving more and more women into the workplace, maybe it's not what they want to do with their life. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I'm very lucky. My wife and I are very lucky that we're able to afford that she can stay home and take care of our son. That was our goal from the minute he was born. It's a very traditional way of thinking about it. But I think that's ideal because if I don't want daycare raising my kid. Like, there's no way around it. I don't want a daycare raising my child. I want him to be home, enjoy his life at home, not think school is a 24/7 thing from cradle to 24 or whatever they expect people to stop going to school because of college and everything. Let's continue looking out over this fact sheet for the executive order. It improves economic opportunity in rural and urban communities. The executive order directs agencies to spur economic growth in rural areas and advance more equitable urban development by ensuring that federal resources contribute to building wealth and opportunity in these communities through locally led development. But that's doublespeak, because if the focus is on LGBTQI plus and racial equity and gender equity, you go into rural communities in red states, they're more likely to be white, and they're more likely to be heterosexual and not meet these standards. So is it one or the other? I mean, if it's an across the board, making sure to fix our economy, which is very screwed up right now with year over year inflation at 6.something%, which is off the rails. You'll go to the grocery store where things are up at least 20% in many situations. Yes, we need to fix our economy. It's not working correctly. People don't want to re-enter the workforce, for better or worse, and there's no housing. Like, businesses want to move to New Hampshire, and there's no place to put new workers. Good luck finding a house that's on the market for more than 2 weeks that's worth anything or isn't extraordinarily expensive so that the middle class can't afford it. We need to fix the middle class in this country, not focus on this equity nonsense. We're getting out of COVID. Blue states are still trying to recover from how they screwed up their own states because they shut down. Our political situation is polarized and just painful to listen to half the time. This should not be the focus. I am so against the executive order on further advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Worst title ever. Say what you will about the Inflation Reduction Act. At least it rolled off the tongue as much as the title was a lie. All right, so New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead, newenglandtake.com.